Let's carry on and talk about some of the common types of questions that you might encounter during an interview, particularly during a college interview. You're going to notice something about these questions very quickly. All right. First question. I know that you are all going to be terrified by this question because it can be a terrifying question. Tell me about yourself. What an open-ended question. How on earth does one begin to answer this? Essentially, when you're prompted with a question like this, basically, I have a theme and an overall principle that I always like to tell students about when it comes to interviews. And this is from having done a whole bunch of these, interviewed over 200 people for Yale, right? Whenever you're confronted with any sort of a question, and you can do this for interviews and you can do this for your essays too, where you're responding to questions or phrases, it's important to get at what I like to call the question behind the question. So you're going to see something like the actual question itself and the prompt in the case of an essay. But what you need to start thinking about is ultimately what information this question is trying to provoke. What type of response this is meant to provoke. What information colleges are trying to learn about you by asking this about yourself. What is it that they're actually trying to find out? They're essentially looking to see how you describe yourself when given an open-ended choice. When you're not given any specific leading information about what to talk about in the context of yourself, they're trying to just see what you say. Because what you choose to say when given an open-ended question like this has a lot of implications and reflects very strongly on who you are as a person. They didn't lead you in any direction with this prompt. They just kept it open-ended. They said, tell me about yourself. There's no sort of edge to it goal. It's very open-ended. So what you say in response, given this open-ended prompt, is going to be very revealing about your priorities and how you regard yourself. Responding to this question is essentially like an elevator pitch. You need to be able to, in about 10 to 20 seconds, 10 to 30 seconds, talk about yourself, right? What you think the most salient points of yourself and your identity are, right? Who are you? Don't make this too long. You can say things like your name, your school, what class year you are, what your current interests are, maybe a fun fact or two. Like, for example, my name is Robert. I'm a recent Yale grad. I'm interested in the classical world, in things like food. I work in art and I work in college. I work in college application advising, and I'm left-handed and I'm unable to whistle or snap my fingers. And that you've just gotten a whole bunch of information about me very quickly. Now, this is the sort of thing where, yeah, you don't want to be overly rehearsed in responding to this question, but you do want to have maybe some salient bullet points of information that you think are some of the most important components and tidbits about who you are as a person. So feel free to, when thinking about how to respond to a question like this, feel free to put this prompt on a sheet of paper and write some things down. That's totally okay. This is a very common, not just in its current form, variants of this question. Who are you? Tell me about yourself. What are the most important pieces of your identity? Things like that. Those are all variants of the similar question. Again, see what I mean by the question behind the question? All of those questions that I just asked are all essentially getting at the same information. They all have the same question behind the question. So try doing something like that. Try writing this down. Write down some salient bits of info about yourself. Who are you? I am an older brother. I am a son. Things like that. Write down all these different pieces of information that you feel are most defining to who you are, and then just begin to internalize those as you can. Again, you don't need to memorize this. It doesn't need to be overly scripted, but it's good to have some of that information in your head and readily deployable should you ever be asked this question. And chances are you will be asked this question at some point.